going to check that this is working. Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me fine? Is this good? Okay, perfect. Thanks, Lee, for that introduction. My name is Dara. I'm a software engineer, and today I'll be talking to you about what using AI at work looks like in the life of a software engineer. Okay, so quick run through of how this is going to go. I'll start off, like I said, kind of walking you through what does my day look like in practicalities. I'll then move on to where AI fits in, which is the main portion of the talk. And then finally, I'll close out with skills that I use day to day. And if you were to go into this role, what kind of skills you would need. And hopefully at the end of this, you have a real image of what that looks like. Before I begin, I'm going to do a quick icebreaker. And I need a show of hands. I need you to participate. Okay, I saw one already, but... First question, how many of you have used AI tools like ChatGPT? Amazing. This is most of the room. Amazing. Okay. Next. How many of you think AI will replace most jobs? Okay. I'm going to say about half of the room. And finally, how many of you would consider a career in tech? Oh, love it. Oh. Amazing. Okay, it's very encouraging. All right, let's get into the talk. Now, who am I? I've said what I do and all that. I'm Nigerian. I'm born and raised there, and now I currently live in London. So I've been in London for about 3 years now. At university, I studied a course called Multimedia Technology and Design, and it was very exciting because it involved things like film, photography, animation, 3D design, and there was a bit of web design, and that's what kind of piqued my interest. So what was most exciting was the idea of having something in my head and being able to actually create that using code. And so over the course of a few months, I would kind of download website templates, play around with them, try and tweak the code, and I found that I was enjoying myself, and I was also learning how to code in the process. And fast forward a few years, now I'm a software engineer. I'm really passionate about design, and so the idea of sort of like how the websites that we use every day, how we interact with those, and how those experiences can be improved. And outside of work, I love tennis. Any tennis players here? I love cooking, and I love Scrabble. Enough about me. I'm gonna jump into, okay, am I doing this right? Okay. What is a software engineer? Again, I need a show of hands. Does anybody know what a software engineer does? Okay, I see about 3, 4 hands. Think of the apps that you use every day, right? So like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, right? These are apps that we interact with every day. And behind all of these apps are software engineers. So a software engineer is essentially somebody who designs and builds applications, websites, systems that people use every day. And so even things like the games that you play, a software engineer is the person who's kind of building that in the background. And that's what's most exciting about this, is that if you have an idea for something in your head, you can actually create it and make that real. And what we do is we work with designers, we work with product managers, we work with other engineers to kind of bring all of these tools together, right? So Spotify is a great example of that. Spotify is an application that has over 1 billion users. And think of the idea of working on a product that's used by 1 billion people is very exciting. So now I've kind of told you who I am, what I do. Let's make this a little more practical, what a day in my life looks like. So I'll typically start the day off with a quick meeting with my team, which is what we call it a daily stand-up, where we kind of run through what we've been working on, whether we're blocked by anything, whether we need help with anything. And then I would move on to sort of working on something that my team is currently building, so building out a feature, for example. I could also decide I want to do some more collaboration with other people in my team, so we call it pair programming, and that's basically getting on a call with another engineer and coding up something together. And then finally, planning. That's also a big part. So that's coming up with new ideas, documenting things, writing things down. There's a lot of this that's part of my role. And if you look at the bottom right corner, I have AI tools there. And that's because my role, across my entire day and across all these different categories of my day, I'm heavily using AI. And my job has changed so much over the last 6 months just because of AI. So in a stand-up meeting, for example, I would use AI to record meeting notes or summarize what somebody's saying. For building out features, I would use AI to sort of like structure my thinking, for example. Pair programming, I would use AI alongside another engineer if we're having issues with the code, use AI to solve problems, try and figure out what's happening. And then planning, again, summarizing things, writing out documents, planning, coming up with new ideas. It's such a constant in the day of the life of a software engineer. Okay, so we've gone through what a software engineer does. We've gone through what that day looks like. Now I'm making it even more practical with this simple application called Guess the Song. So here's a recording of how this works. It's a simple application I built, and the idea is you're presented with 4 emojis, and you have to guess what those emojis represent in a song. So here, you see I get some right and I get some wrong. My music knowledge isn't the best. But essentially, this is an application that's built by a software engineer. So I'm running through that. I think, yeah. Don't know if I have to wait for the recording to stop. But I hope you get the idea. Essentially, it's 4 emojis that represent a clue, and you guess what the song is called. Now, I'm going to use this application to show you how I actually use AI in my role. So firstly, we'll talk about how I use AI to understand how code works. All right, so on the left hand of the screen is my code. So this is code that a software engineer has written. And on the right-hand side of the screen is AI, essentially, right? So this is an AI tool that I use day to day. And what I've written there is, I am new to this code, briefly explain to me how it works. And within a few seconds, you see it sort of generating. This is a guess the song quiz game. It's a single file. It tells me what the different methods are in the code. It tells me how it works, sort of talking about the specific logic within the application. And then at the end, it kind of just summarizes in short. You see emojis, you guess which song they represent, you repeat for 10 rounds, and you get a final score. Now, this is a very simple example. If you think of Spotify, it's a huge app. It's catering to so many users, which means that the systems that we kind of work with day to day are very complex. I remember when I started, and I looked at one of the code bases, and I was utterly confused, right? So this is a great example of how I would use AI to speed up my understanding pretty quickly, instead of spending, say, an hour to 2 hours or even more to kind of understand how code works. All I need to do is ask AI to help me. And it's sort of like an assistant, right? It's there to guide me, it's there to support me. So it's not necessarily replacing me or replacing what I do. And if you think of a team where, say, somebody new joins a team, they're able to quickly onboard themselves, get a sense of, what's happening, how the applications work, what they look like. So this is a solid example of how AI is used for software engineering, and I do this all the time within my role. Next, how I use AI to plan improvements. So we have our application, right? We want to make it better. Again, code on the left-hand side, AI on the right. So what I've done here is I'm just asking it, what features can I add to make this game more engaging or more interesting for teenagers? And within a few seconds, you see it come up with new ideas. So let's wait for it to. I've specified list 2 ideas only, and it's planning, and then it brings out a response. And again, this is another way to come up with new ideas, right? We're able to come up with new ideas on our own, but why not use the help of an assistant to do this, right? And it's come up with two ideas here. I think one is multiplayer, and there's another idea there. And I can go ahead and actually ask it to implement these ideas, right? Make them real for me. Again, speeding up my productivity, speeding up my time. And this is one example, but there's so many other different ways that I could use this for. So if I've written a document that I'm supposed to share with my team, I could ask AI to either clean it up, make it easier to understand. I've gone on to say, what is one small improvement I can make to the code, right? So we're working with many different people, right? So we work with other engineers, we work with designers, and we want people to be able to understand what we've written, right? So the code on the left has been written by an engineer, me, but somebody else might decide to kind of join me on this application and improve it and expand it, and they need to understand what I've done, right? So they would use AI to sort of speed up their understanding and also help them make improvements to the code. And then finally, using AI to fix bugs in my code. This is probably the most used way, the most used way that I implement this within my day-to-day role. So if you look at the screen, we had boxes before, we had emojis before, and for some reason, nothing is appearing anymore, so clearly there's something wrong, right? So I go onto my AI tool and I say, my game is not loading anymore, what could the issue be? And within a few seconds, it tells me what's wrong, and it helps me to fix the issue. So again, with code, there's so many things that can go wrong, and if you think about code that backs up Instagram or Snapchat or Twitter, these are catering to so many users. Any tiny thing could potentially break your application, right? So again, you're getting support from this AI tool. It's told me there's a typo, and it says that should do it, and within a few seconds, it's fixed it, and now the app is back to working. So if you notice, I'm not sure if I can go back with this, but let's try it. If you notice, when it returned the response to me, it asked me to review the changes, right? So we don't just blindly accept what it's done because it can be wrong. It's not perfect. Even human beings can be wrong. So you have to also understand what AI is telling you. You don't just blindly accept the changes. So I review the changes, and then I decide that it's right, and then I go ahead and the app is working. So again, I have spent maybe an hour plus before trying to figure out why something isn't working, and I realize maybe a question mark is somewhere or there's a typo somewhere, and it's just a really quick way to move past these small issues and kind of get back to working on my application. So this is a really good example of where I use AI. All right, so I've given you a brief run through of what this looks like practically. Onto the skills that you actually need. So I have 6 skills here, and if you notice, nothing here is technical, right? So there's no programming language you need to know, there's no technical skills, it's all soft skills. And the reason for that is because majority of the skills I use as a software engineer are actually soft skills, right? And I'm a strong believer in anybody can learn anything. Once you have these solid skills, there's no technical or programming language that's impossible to learn. So communication is a big one. Like I said, you're working with multiple engineers, trying to understand how things work. A lot of the times you're sharing new ideas, and so you need to be able to communicate well. You need to be, whether that's written or spoken. You also need to be able to work in a team. None of these apps were built by one person, so we're constantly collaborating, working with other people, learning from other people. Curiosity, I think the previous speaker mentioned something along the lines of genius is asking the right questions, and that's such a big thing. I used to be afraid of asking questions because I was concerned that it would reveal how much I didn't know, but it actually just reveals your curiosity. So this is such a big one in this industry, especially because there's constant change, right? Like I said, my role looks so different today than it did 6 months ago. Problem solving, again, I'm using AI to assist me in solving problems. That's a big one. Attention to detail. So any tiny thing could break an application. And so when you're pushing out code, you need to watch out for the nitty-gritty details. And then finally, my favorite one, learning how to learn. I'm constantly learning. I've been in this industry for over 6 years now, and I'm still learning day to day. It's such an important skill to be able to know what your learning style is. How do I pick up new information? Is that videos? Is that text? Is that whatever format that's in? Because you will need to learn. There's always something new happening. And with that, I think that's the end of my talk. Thank you so much for listening.
Dara, that was amazing. The whole time I was watching you, my heart was singing, because that's exactly what I do in my job as well. How you work is how I work as a software engineer. We are going to take one or two questions, just if it's okay, just from the audience. So if we could get some audience questions on the screen. There's a really nice general question there is, as a software engineer at Spotify, what is your favorite part of the day?
Ooh, let me think. I probably would say it's the coding parts of it. Yeah, I think that doesn't necessarily take up majority of my work, but it's the coding parts of it, and it's also working alongside other people, because I work in a team of about 10 people, and of course it's such a huge company, but there's so much to learn from other people. And I'm not just working with engineers, I'm working with designers, I'm working with product managers, I'm working with the data engineers that kind of, process your data. So yeah, I would say that's it.
That's awesome. There's someone who says, I'm never off Spotify, I'd love to have your job. Isn't that awesome? There is a good question here as well, is like, is there anything that AI can do that a skilled human cannot? I mean, I know from experience it does help me learn things faster. So do you have anything to add to that?
Is there anything it cannot do? I think it's very good at using knowledge that already exists, right? So it's not, AI works with information and knowledge and databases that already exist, right? But there are situations where it doesn't have the right context, right? So if you think of Spotify, maybe there's code that was built 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and it was built by somebody, and it was built a certain way because of XYZ. AI might not necessarily have that knowledge, and so if it's fixing something for you or if it's building something, it could get things wrong because it's missing context. So at the end of the day, that's why you always have to review what it's doing and make sure that it, within the right context, is doing the right thing and it's not kind of breaking your code. Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, that is the best way to answer it. I totally agree. Dara, thank you so much for your talk.